And so if your dream has always been to be able to do some really cool things with push-ups like this, well, you're on the wrong freaking video because I can't do any of that shit. But I do promise to help you find the right type of push-up to help you build more muscle today. What's up guys, Jeff Cavalier, ATHLEAN-X.com. So look, unless you're in the military right now or your goal is to simply do more push-ups, I think we can all agree push-ups are more of a means to an end to something bigger. In this case, a bigger chest. If you're looking to build a bigger chest through push-ups, I would ask you not to try to simply increase the number of push-ups you're doing, but to actually increase the difficulty of the push-up that you're doing. Think about it this way. When an athlete is trying to build more muscle in the gym, they have the option to simply add more weight to the end of the bar in the form of progressive overload, which is a tried and true method for doing that. Well, what does a calisthenic athlete do? Or what does somebody that's just looking to build their body through push-ups do? You have to find a more difficult version of the push-up, something that mechanically challenges those same muscles in a more difficult way to provide the progressive overload that you're looking for. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how to do that from beginner to advanced, what level of push-up should you be doing, and how do you progress yourself to make sure you're building muscle. Let's start breaking them down one by one. So when you're trying to build muscle with push-ups, you need to make sure that the volume that you're accruing is effective volume. In other words, the reps that you're doing are doing something. And when we're talking about just doing a certain number of push-ups or increasing the number of them, you're not ensuring that. And there's a big relationship between the overload that you create through choosing more difficult versions of the push-up or more challenging for you and the number of reps that you do. So what we have to do is pick a rep range. And for me, I always say somewhere between 20 and 30. If you can get to 30 of any variation of a push-up, it's time to stop doing that push-up and instead focus on something more challenging. So what would the beginners do? Well, let's say we start all the way at the bottom, a knee push-up. If you can do 30 knee push-ups, it's time to move on. But if you can't do them like this, you need to focus on doing them correctly. And what we're doing is keeping that straight back and keeping that butt down. Because far too often people do this and it makes the exercise not even really that effective for the chest. It turns it almost more into a shoulder exercise. But instead, if you keep that butt drop down and you lower your chest down in every rep, and importantly on all these push-ups you'll see, extend your elbows all the way out. At that point, when you can hit 30, it's time to move on to the next exercise, which would be this. And this would now be the classic push-up. So we get those knees off the ground, and again, lower yourself all the way down, touch your chest to the ground, and come up. And the key here, as always, is to get that full extension of the elbows. I've made videos all about this in the past. In fact, push-ups are killing your gains, and that is because people always cut off the last 2 inches here, which is the most productive part of the exercise. If you can get through full extension and you can work your way up to the point where you can do 30 of these, then it's time to move on to the next variation. Well, now the next challenge will become the hand release push-up. And what's interesting about this is that slight little additional movement at the bottom is going to do a few things to make this a lot more difficult and challenging. Number one, it's going to slow the tempo down. And anytime you slow down tempo on a push-up, it becomes more difficult. And the tendency is to rush through our reps to get to that number again, but with the focus now on increasing the difficulty level to drive that muscle growth, this is now an option for you. And here again, what it does is also challenges some different muscles too, the rotator cuff. The simple act of lifting your hands off the ground is going to engage the rotator cuff, which is a shoulder stabilizer muscle that's important to the move, but more importantly, it's just increasing the range of motion of every single repetition that you do, ensuring that you get your chest down to the ground. But if even 30 repetitions of the hand release push-up is below your ability level, well, it's time to now start doing something different, and that is playing with the tempo of the exercise. I mentioned how slowing them down makes them more difficult. Well, if you do a pause push-up, you're going to have a more challenging time doing the exercise. But again, challenging equals more muscle growth. In this case, you simply go down to the bottom and you pause for about 3 seconds on every rep. Again, it's actually more difficult to hold this pause in this very shallow, low-depth position because your muscles are still firing to hold you there. But when 30 repetitions of these aren't even able to make your arms quiver anymore, well, we still stick with the same theme of tempo, but we move on to a more challenging exercise, and that's the 1.5 push-up. In other words, for every 1 push-up you're doing, you're going to do an extra half. You have to go down, have the body control to lift yourself up halfway, go back down again to the hardest, most difficult range of the push-up, and then push yourself back out of it again. Again, we're playing with the tempo, but more importantly here, we are playing with the overload and tension felt by the chest, and that is the main driver of the exercise's ability to build more muscle growth for you. But if even those are now no longer providing a challenge for you, what are you going to do now? Well, again, we have another option for tempo, and this time we take it to the extreme. These are slow motion push-ups. And what we're talking about is 5 seconds down and 5 seconds up. And what makes this more challenging is the 5-second eccentric, or the lowering portion of the rep. And why that's challenging is because that's actually an additional driver of muscle growth. Well, now you got two things working at once. You've increased the difficulty level and you've added that extra component. But once again, your goal here is 30. When you can do 30 of these, once again, it's time to move on. And at that point, the best thing you can do is actually start to decrease the number of points of contact that you have with the ground. The push-up is done with 4 points of contact on the ground: 2 hands and 2 feet. But when we start to lift one of those off the ground, the exercise becomes instantly more difficult because now the remaining limbs are in control of more and more body weight. So what are we talking about? Well, we have exercises like the prowler push-up, which is going to again take one of those feet off the ground, shifting more of that load, especially as we anteriorly shift our whole body weight forward. Then we have the Spider-Man push-up, which is going to open up that hip, take it out to the side, once again creating more overload for the muscles that are pushing the rest of your body weight up with one less limb helping out. Then of course we can do the step-through push-up. This requires maybe a little bit more flexibility in the leg that steps through and across, but once again it's still doing the same thing, decreasing those points of contact on the ground and making it more challenging. And finally, we have the cross knee push-up, which might be the easiest of these 4, but it doesn't really matter. Whatever version you choose one that's going to provide that challenge that once again takes whatever push-up count you were doing before, lowers it down to that more challenging level so it can produce the growth you're after. But we're not done yet, because we can actually keep the challenge coming by increasing the challenge on the chest alone, meaning taking away some of the assistance that we're getting from the triceps. And the best way to do that is with a wide arm push-up. The wider the hands go, the less elbow extension we're getting to perform the push-up, the less tricep contribution to the exercise. That means the chest is going to have to do more work here. And so while the traditional version of the push-up may be more efficient, it's inefficiency that you're seeking when you're trying to drive new muscle growth. Remember, if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. To change your chest, you got to challenge your chest. This is a great way to do it. But we can become even more challenging and dynamic than that, and that's with the archer push-up. And here, it's the same wide arm approach with the same effect of minimizing the tricep contribution here and making it more difficult, but the dynamic nature of it, shifting the load from left to right and left to right, is going to definitely make this more difficult for you. Every move from right to left is considered a separate repetition, so when you can do 15 to the right and 15 to the left, you've reached your 30 count. Well, you still got one more step to go, and that is something much more explosive. And for explosive, we're talking about plyometric variations of the push-up. And we all know how difficult they can become, but again, they can drive muscle growth through that difficulty. Whether it be just simply a regular plyometric clearing yourself off the ground, or an additional clap that's going to make you get a little bit higher off the ground and therefore have to push a little bit harder, or actually taking it to an extreme level with the Superman push-up, having to get yourself even higher off the ground, or finally something more athletic like the Hannibal push-up here. The idea is find that key variation that drives the muscle growth through the increase in difficulty and not just on that increased focus on reps. So let's do a quick helpful recap here. If you're currently doing knee push-ups and you can do 30 of those, it's time to move on to push-ups. If you're doing push-ups and can do 30 of those in one set, it's time to move on to hand release push-ups. If you can do hand release push-ups for 30 reps, it's time to move on to the pause push-up. Once you can knock those out, increase that range of motion to 1.5 push-ups. From the 1.5 push-up, once you're able to do 30, it goes on to the slow motion 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down push-up. From here, look to take one of those points of contact off the ground through some variation of a 3-point push-up. From there, you're going to widen those arms out to take the triceps out of the equation for a wide arm push-up. Next, you're going to make it more dynamic through an archer push-up. And when 30 archer push-ups can be done, you're going to move on to something much more explosive, some variation of a plyometric push-up. But if at the end of the day you still insist on doing traditional regular push-ups, well, for God's sake, do one thing for me. Stop doing 100 push-ups a day. Watch this video over here for an explanation of why, and also if you're looking for a complete push-up workout, the perfect push-up workout is one you can watch there. If you're looking for a complete step-by-step program, guys, you can find them all over at ATHLEAN-X.com, and also if you haven't done so, click subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video when we put one out. See you soon.